Alright guys, so with this lesson we're going to talk about imaginary numbers, alright? So to this point in your math life, you've only dealt with real numbers. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, half, negative half, all of that type of stuff. Today we're going to introduce to you imaginary numbers. That's why the other ones are known as real numbers, right? Imaginary numbers are this I. So it says, what does the letter I stand for? Right? So an imaginary number or imaginary unit or I is actually the square. So -1. Pure imaginary numbers are square roots of negative real numbers, which is really what today's lesson is showing you. Alright, so square roots of negative real numbers are finding pure imaginary numbers. Alright, so right here, anytime there's a negative, that means we have a -1 times, and then what we were talking about yesterday was simplifying radicals. So you're still going to do a lot of the same stuff that you just got done doing in the last lesson. So menu 2, 3, but I'm going to put 27 instead of -27. And so that gives me 3 to the third. Because I know that negative is this -1 and then times 3 3's. Well, this -1 right here is my I on the outside. And then I have a pair of 3's. So what I have here is I have 3I, that's my pair of 3's, that's the -1, times the square root of 3. That is your pure imaginary number. Alright, so same thing applies here, the -216. So we know -1 is one of the numbers inside that square root because of the negative. It always is. Every time you have a -1 is present. So menu 2, 3, 216, 2 to the third, 3 to the third. Alright, so that means right here we have 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. Alright, so I got a pair of 2's, I got a pair of 3's, so that means I have 2 times 3 times I on the outside, remember the I being the -1, and on the inside we have 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is 6I times the square root of 6. Alright, so imaginary number system. This works in 4's is what you want to think about. Alright, so I to the first is equal to I, which is also your square root of -1. Okay, so keeping in mind that I is the square root of -1. Well, I squared is equal to -1 because that is the square root of -1 times the square root of -1. I to the third is equal to -I. I to the fourth is equal to 1 because that's going to be 2 of these. That's going to be -1 times -1. Alright, so I to the fifth, which is now 1 times an extra I, right, is I, and it starts over. I to the sixth is equal to -1. I to the seventh is equal to -I. And I to the fourth is equal to 1. So when you're given something like I to the 25th, what you do is you take 25 and you divide it by, not take the square root, but divide it by 4. Well, 4 goes into 25 6 times. 6 times 4 is 24. We subtract those, we get 1 left over, right? That leftover, that extra that you have, tells you where you're going to be. So if I have 1 as a remainder, right, that means I'm here, I to the first. So the answer to this is I. I to the 25th is I. Alright, so 63 divided by 4. 4 goes into 6 once, that's 4. 2, 3. So that goes in 5 times. That's 20, right? Leaving me with 3. So that means I'm going to be at I to the third. So my answer to this one, if I simplify that, is negative I. Okay, so moving on. Products, they work the same way. Think of i's as like x's. So if I'm going to multiply these two here, right? Negative 5, it's negative 5 times 3, and then it's I times I. Well, negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. I times I is I squared. Well, we said I squared on the last page is equal to negative 1. So then this is negative 15 times negative 1, or 15. Okay, so same thing applies here. So that negative means I have an I times the square root of 6 times I times the square root of 15. Okay, so this is I times I, right? And then I have 6, the square root of 6 times 15. Okay, so that's I squared times the square root of 90. I need to simplify that 90, square root of 90. So menu 2, 3, 90 is 2 times 3 squared times 5. Okay, so I squared we just mentioned is negative 1. In here, this is 2 times 3 times 3 times 5. So I have a pair of 3's. So that's going to come out. So I have negative 1 times 3 times 2 times 5 on the inside, which gives me negative 3 times the square root of 10. There's your answer. Yeah, that one took a little bit because you had to get the i's out, then you had to multiply, then you had to simplify this, but it happens. All right, last example for this one. So it says equations with pure imaginary numbers. So we want to solve x squared plus 64 equals 0. Now, this looks very similar to something we've factored. Well, we are gonna factor this, but we're not gonna factor it like you think we're gonna factor it. Okay? So we're going to start with the square root method. So x squared plus 64 equals 0. We're going to subtract 64 from both sides. So that's x squared equals negative 64. Then we're going to take the square root. Alright, so x is equal to, well, this is what? Negative 1. So then I have menu 2, 3, 64, so that's 2 to the 6th power. So that's 2, 2, 2, that's 3, 4, 5, 6 2's, right? So I have 1, 2, 3 pairs. Well, that means that I have, what? 2 times 2 times 2 times I, and nothing left. So that means this is going to be what? 8I as my answer. We're not going to worry about the factoring method. Just do them this way. It's easier. Oops. So that's the end of this one.